Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Bible study video. With me, I have Abby.
Hiya.
And Stu.
Hello.
Abby did the sermon last
Sorry.
Abby did the sermon last Sunday on Genesis 29. So before we jump into it, why don't you guys take some time to read it? It's the whole chapter, right, Abby?
Yeah, it is. I skipped
Okay.
some verses, but
yeah, just read the whole thing. We get some context. So Genesis chapter 29. As you read it, try to think about any questions you have, anything that stands out to you, or anything that you feel that you can apply in the coming week. Okay, let's read together and then we'll come back. Great! Okay, so Abby, why don't you take us through? You basically went through the whole chapter from start to end, right? So why don't we just give us a bit of context, a bit of background.
So it's really following on from Dan. Last Sunday, Dan talks about Jacob and Esau and how Jacob deceived his father. And then there's actually a chapter in between this where Jacob has a big encounter with, I suppose say Jesus, but that would be theologically incorrect, God. Mm-hmm. And then now he's been on a mission basically to find his uncle's family. And so that's where we meet him here in chapter 29. And I think it's the idea that he needs to marry someone to kind of start his new life. And this is just the story of what happens. So his uncle obviously deceives him, he gets married to the wrong person, and then it kind of plays out, how do those characters play out? So Rachel and Leah, what's the dynamic there? So that's the story.
So how does it happen? So he runs away, and then what?
He runs away because his brother wants to kill him. And so he is being sent to his uncle Laban because he's going to go see relatives. And then he meets Rachel in the fields. She's a shepherd, which I thought was pretty cool. You don't often hear of Old Testament characters that are female having a job. And so he falls in love with her. It's love at first sight. And it's quite unusual actually in this context for someone to marry for love. Usually you marry because it's a logistical thing or your family makes you, but Jacob marries Rachel for love, and so he kind of actively pursues her and has to make all these plans with her dad to pay for her, I suppose, in a way, because that was also custom at the time. He had to give a price. He pays a lot. The equivalent of Malaysian ringgit would have been about 250,000 ringgit is what he pays. So it's 2.5 years salary, but he pays 7 years salary.
That's crazy.
Which is just quite a lot, really.
Yeah.
She was beautiful, but I don't know if she's worth that.
Why do you think Jacob was, pursuing this, or why the sudden kind of switch? So he's deceived his father, he's got this blessing and he's run away, and then now what's he trying to do?
I don't know. There's a theory from a guy called Ernest Becker. He's an American anthropologist. She says if you don't want God in your life, or if you're uninterested in God, there's kind of a void, and people try and fill that void, I suppose, with loads of different things, but in particular romance. And so people have this idea that if you pursue your one true love and you get married to them, that will kind of fix the rest of your life and make you feel at peace with everything. And I think maybe that's part of Jacob's story, that he's destroyed his own family, and so now he's trying to fix something and feels, maybe I start again.
And you talked a bit about how he was looking for fulfillment and contentment in Rachel.
Yes.
And obviously it's okay to be in a romantic relationship with someone, and that is a good thing, and that is a gift. But you also, paralleled this with us putting our contentment in temporary things, and how that only leads to temporary contentment.
Exactly.
I loved your thing about the new iPhone, and how you spend so long saving up for an iPhone, the latest one, and it's delivered, and then basically you've been conned, and it arrives, and then it's not the legit one. But I suppose what I was thinking when you were sharing was, it's not wrong to enjoy these things and to enjoy these blessings that God has given us, and it wasn't wrong for Jacob to enjoy Rachel. But I suppose the question is, it comes back to contentment versus enjoyment. Is there a difference, or how do we enjoy something without pursuing it to make us content?
I think contentment is very different because it's kind of a trust you place on it. Like, it's okay to desire things, but it's when you place your full weight of like satisfaction or whatever on something that's temporary, ultimately it will let you down because it's going to run out.
Yeah.
It's going to stop. It's going to be over. And so then you're kind of left disappointed. And so that's why we said that contentment is temporary when entrusted to temporary things.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. Which kind of leads us to our first question. We want you to discuss, what do you think is the difference between enjoyment and contentment? What do you think the differences are? Where do you think you are at? Do you feel that you are content with the way things are right now, etc.? Yeah, so just discuss. So just take some time to discuss. Okay, and so that's Jacob. So Jacob thought that he could kind of fix his life by getting married, starting a family, starting afresh somewhere else. But things don't quite really go his way, right?
Nope. So he ends up getting completely conned by his uncle. The wedding night arrives, he's done his 7 years, and then he gets to the wedding. The bride had a lot of like things over her face, as was the custom at the time. And then in the morning he realizes that it's Leah that he's married, not Rachel. And so he's absolutely devastated. And so Leah is Rachel's sister. And this kind of then begins us off in the narrative between the two sisters. So Rachel is described as being a beautiful figure, and Leah is described as having weak eyes, as in verse 16 and 17.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what are weak eyes?
Yeah, well, this is what we were debating. Like, what does that mean? Like, eyebrow game off, like uneven eyeliner. But I think actually this isn't really an aesthetic thing. This is a comparison issue. She wasn't unattractive. She just was normal, but maybe her sister was quite attractive. And then just in comparison to that, she's described as weak-eyed.
And comparison is massive.
Yeah.
I think just a massive part of culture and about how we operate as humans. And maybe you could really briefly share your illustration.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was just a very simple but helpful way of talking about comparison.
Yeah, so we were kind of saying, like, imagine a takeaway coffee cup and a champagne flute. And yes, they both hold liquid. They're both used for drinking out of. But imagine they began to compare with each other. So, like the coffee cup would look at the champagne flute and it would think, oh, like they're so tall and slender, they get to go to so many weddings, like they always have expensive things. And then maybe the coffee cup comparison, the champagne flute would look at it and think, wow, like the coffee cup gets to travel so much, or they get to go out and about, and they're always photographed in cool places. And I basically think that the issue is if you put hot liquid in a champagne flute, it's going to crack. It wasn't made for that. And I suppose that's what comparison leads to. It kind of makes you almost miss your purpose, because you think you're looking at someone else's life and comparing your own, and then you're not measuring up, I suppose. It doesn't lead to contentment, because comparison is always about what you lack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Rachel and Leah, where did the comparison lead there?
Well, I think there's two forms of comparison. If this is something you're interested in, there's a great book by Sophie DeWitt, something. She writes a book called Compared to Her, and the whole concept of comparison is that you can compare up or you can compare down.
That's interesting.
So I think we all struggle with like looking at other people's lives and then feeling a bit rubbish about us, like, oh, well, they got promoted, or they're going on holiday, or they've got something that I don't have, and you kind of put yourself down. But then the flip side of comparison, which is kind of a bit sinister, and I feel like we're all guilty of, and we all do, even subconsciously, is that you then start comparing downwards. So you say, well, at least I have this, or I'm better at them than that, and then you kind of compare to make yourself feel better. So there's kind of two ways, and I feel in the story, Leah's being compared down like the whole time, like she's not as good as Rachel. But then there's kind of this turn where Leah can have kids and Rachel can't.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. And Rachel does go on to have kids, but she kind of turns her comparison into competition to kind of beat her sister, and providing the firstborn son, which is it's kind of sad. The whole thing's sad.
Yeah, that's true. That leads us to the second question. So what we wanted to discuss is, well, do you struggle with comparison? I mean, we're not assuming that everybody does. Maybe you don't, maybe you do. So maybe just have a chat about that. And if it's something that you do struggle with, how have you in the past, or how are you thinking that you will try to cope with it? Or maybe if it's something that you don't struggle with, you could share with the group about why that is so. Where do you get your confidence from? Yeah, so
Great.
let's discuss. Okay, so there's a turnaround right at the end. So I love, maybe you could take us through Leahs Children. So yeah, she managed to get children, but we see that even as this was given to her by God, like it said that God opened her womb, but she still used her children as a means of comparison. But there did come a point where that stopped, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could take us through that.
So she has her first 3 kids, Reuben, Simeon, and then Levi. What's really cool is the names of the kids, what they mean. So Reuben means to be seen, which is something she wanted from her husband. Simeon means to be heard, and she really wanted her husband to hear her, listen to her. And the third one, Levi, means to be attached or connected, have connection. And again, something that she desperately wanted from her husband. And then it's after her third one that she just there's this turning point. And I think this gives you confidence. She didn't go on this massive big spiritual retreat. She didn't fasting and praying. Like, she made a decision, and it says, this time I will praise. And I think that gives us a lot of hope that actually you can struggle, and then actually, okay, I've made a decision this time. I'm going to praise God. And I love this because it's actually from the 4th child that Jesus comes from. I just love that God always has a greater purpose than we even realize. And it was once she decided to praise that she kind of unlocked her contentment, because she was able to see what she had, and it was this attitude of gratitude.
Yeah. Okay, well, that leads us to the final discussion question, which is practically, how do we practically foster daily gratitude? I mean, I think gratitude is one of those things where it's really easy to talk about it. It's really easy to say, just be thankful and stuff. But then when you're in the midst of maybe experiencing struggles or going through work stress or things like that, in the middle of it, it's just really hard to remember that you need to be grateful, or that there are actual things to be grateful for.
Yeah, and I think when we compare, it's trying to figure out how can we make this a useful thing. So can it lead us to prayer for ourselves? Can it lead us to praise to God? Or can it lead us into love for other people? It's kind of using it as a means. So I think with gratitude, it's all about trying to be thankful for what we have right now.
Okay, so discuss, and then we'd love if you could end with prayer about any of the above things. So maybe in the discussion you talked about something you struggle with around comparison, or maybe gratitude, something that you are struggling, or maybe you're just going through a hard time right now and you're finding this topic quite relevant. But yeah, so discuss this last question and then pray for each other. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See ya.